Final Fantasy VII deserved a remake. Dead Space deserved a remake. Resident Evil 2 deserved a remake. And I think most gamers would agree some games are so influential that seeing them rebuilt for a modern audience feels almost impossible to argue against. Because when a remake's done right, it can become something really special. It can take a game that was limited by the technology of its time and finally let that original vision breathe. Resident Evil 2 is probably the perfect example. Nobody finished Resident Evil 2 Remake and thought, finally, the inventory menu's in 4K. The remake didn't ask, how do we make this look better? It asked, why did this work in the first place? And that's the difference between a remake that works and one that doesn't. Because a great remake isn't just rebuilding a game, it's understanding what made that game matter. Remakes sit in this weird place between preservation and reinvention. They're kind of looking backward while trying to move forward. And from a developer perspective, I totally understand the appeal. Imagine getting the chance to work on one of the original games that inspired you to even get into the industry. To take something you love and ask, what could this become with the tools we have today? And that's an incredible creative challenge. But from the publisher side, the appeal is a little different. Remakes come with certainty. You already know people care, you already know there's an audience, and you already know the game has a legacy. But legacy alone doesn't guarantee a necessary remake. Pong has a huge legacy, but I'm not sure it needs to be pitched as an open world RPG. Or maybe it does. But every remake needs to answer the same question. What parts of this game actually mattered? Was it the graphics, the mechanics, the technology? Or was it something harder to define? The feeling, the identity, the atmosphere? I think that's where we might be asking the wrong question. Maybe the question isn't, does this game deserve a remake? Maybe it's, what exactly are we trying to preserve? So let's say we decided a game deserves a remake. That sounds simple enough. But then somebody has to make the decision, what stays and what goes. On paper, that's easy. Improve the graphics, modernize controls, fix the camera, clean up menus, get rid of the escort missions. But after the obvious stuff, the choices start to get harder. Because eventually you stop asking, what can we improve? And you start asking, what can we change that doesn't change the game? And that's a much more complicated question. Take tank controls. Were they frustrating? Absolutely. Were fixed camera angles limiting? Of course. Did low poly character models leave a little to the imagination? Well, as a 10-year-old boy playing those games, my imagination was doing a lot of heavy lifting. But here's the thing, I don't think those were just technological limitations. I think they became part of the game's identity. As an example, the fog of Silent Hill and the camera angles of Resident Evil. Those camera angles controlled what you could see, but more importantly, what you couldn't see, and that would kind of leave you afraid of what might be waiting just outside of the frame. They weren't just limitations, they're part of the design. Think about Ocarina of Time. Nobody remembers that game because it pushed the technical limits of polygon count. They remember the feeling of stepping onto Hyrule Field for the first time. The music, the sense of adventure, the quiet moments between the big ones. When we talk about preserving a game, what are we actually talking about? Is it the mechanics, the frame rate, the technology, or is it a feeling? Because those aren't always the same thing. What if some of those rough edges weren't outdated or bugs? What if they were fingerprints? A game's flaws are often part of its personality, and if that's true, then remaking a game isn't just rebuilding it, it's interpreting it. And that's a very different responsibility. On my last video, I argued that studios don't make games, people do. And if that's true, then I think remakes have a fascinating problem. Because you can recreate code, you can recreate mechanics, you can recreate graphics, but how do you recreate the people who gave those things meaning? Take Halo. They just can't seem to find the right identity or direction for this franchise. The recent release of Halo Campaign Evolved flopping is a lesson to be learned. Halo Studios can recreate the assault rifle, they can recreate Master Chief, the Warthog, but can they recreate Bungie? And I don't mean the employees, I mean the philosophy, the confidence, the weird sense of humor, the tiny design decisions you don't notice until they're missing. A game isn't just built by a team, it's shaped by a point of view. Maybe that's the hardest thing to remake. Not the game, the perspective. Metal Gear Solid Delta is another great example. Whether you love it or hate it isn't really the point I'm trying to make here. The question is, if Delta is incredible, who deserves the credit? Is it the team that worked on the remake? Or is it Hideo Kojima for originally coming up with that story and vision 20 years ago? That's not a criticism either. It's a reminder that great remakes stand on the shoulders of even greater originals. And just like Halo Studios, Konami is handling a franchise that no longer has the original creative visionary behind it. Remaking Metal Gear without Kojima is like asking somebody else to finish A Song of Ice and Fire for George R.R. Martin. Except the Metal Gear remakes will probably actually get finished. And that sucks. He's going to die, and we're not going to get to finish that book series. And we're going to get stuck with the TV show ending. And there's nothing more tragic than that. Every great game has a kind of chemistry. The chemistry between like the people making it, the technology they had, the limitations they were working around, and the risks they decided that were worth taking. You can preserve code. You can't preserve chemistry. And I think that's what a lot of modern studios are missing. Black Mesa understood the assignment. It didn't ask, how do we replace Half-Life? It asked, how do we preserve what made Half-Life special in the first place? Valve admitted Zen felt rushed. Black Mesa didn't erase it, it finished it. It expanded and it modernized it. It completely changed the Zen experience. It turned it from a brutal slog to a decently enjoyable section of the game, and lengthy as well. Black Mesa didn't erase it. It finished it, expanded and modernized it, without pretending it was smarter than the original, which is hard to do. The best remakes don't compete with history, they collaborate with it. Some remakes are acts of preservation. Others feel like acts of replacement. The Last of Us. The Last of Us Remastered. The Last of Us Part 1. Every time they released a remake, it made me remake my opinion on the game. At some point, I stopped wondering when the next remake was coming, and I started wondering what original game we weren't getting instead. Every remake has an opportunity cost. Every team rebuilding yesterday is a team that isn't building tomorrow. Maybe Ocarina of Time's remake will be incredible. Honestly, I hope it is, because if there's one game I'd love to experience again for the first time, it's Ocarina of Time. I'm just not sure that's something a remake can give me. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question. Not, does a game need to be remade, but what exactly are we trying to preserve? If the answer is higher resolution, better textures, faster loading, technology can solve those problems. But if the answer is wonder, mystery, identity, the feeling you had the first time you stepped into Hyrule, or heard the Halo theme on the main menu, then technology can't help you. Graphics can't help you. Frame rates can't help you, because those things were never stored on a disc. They were created by a group of people at one moment in time who saw games a certain way. Again, you can preserve code, you can't preserve chemistry. Maybe games are like photographs, and they're supposed to age. Every rough edge, every outdated mechanic, every awkward animation, every limitation is a fingerprint. Erase enough fingerprints and eventually, you aren't restoring history anymore. You're replacing it. That's why the best remakes aren't trying to make old games feel modern. They're trying to make modern players feel what older players felt. Technology can remake a game, but only people can give it a soul. Maybe games don't need to be remade. Maybe they just need to be remembered. Thanks for joining me. I'll catch you next time.